In step 4, you'll explore 2D, 2.5D, and 3D data. We'll begin by using the Explore tool to orbit the scene, and note that our digital terrain model is 2D or flat. And then we'll add the digital terrain model as a ground elevation source, and we'll note that it's visualized now as 2.5D data. Last, we'll add the ortho, and it will also be visualized and draped on our ground layer as a 2.5D layer. And then we'll add our LiDAR data, which will be visualized as a 3D layer in our scene. Back in ArcGIS Pro, I'll activate the map ribbon, and note that the Explore tool can also be used with the right mouse button to pan and with the mouse wheel to zoom in and rotate my scene. So if I click the mouse wheel down and drag my mouse around, I can rotate my scene. If I click and hold the right mouse button down, I can pan my scene. And if I move the mouse wheel towards the scene, rotate it towards the scene, I can zoom in or I can zoom back out, of course. Once I get my 2D scene set the way I want, I'm going to orbit the DTM down so that you can see it's a flat layer. And so we need to add a ground layer to view our layer in 2.5D. So I'm going to right click on ground in the contents pane and select add elevation source layer. In the add elevation source layer window, I'm going to select my DTM and click OK. And that's going to drape my 2D DTM on my ground. And when it does that, it creates a 2.5D presentation of my DTM. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and turn my 2D DTM off in the contents pane. And then I'm going to add from our demo data file geodatabase the ortho raster data set to my scene. And when I do that, it adds it as a 2D layer in the contents pane, but drapes it on our ground DTM Sunset Valley. And so it creates a 2.5D presentation of our ortho image. All right, now I want to add some 3D data, and I can do that in the form of the LiDAR LAS dataset from the catalog pane. And that displays in our contents pane under 3D layers. And in this case, it takes the Z elevation from the shape geometry and displays that in 3D in our view. So our blue spheres are at the lowest elevation and our red spheres are at the highest elevation. All right, go ahead and turn the LAS layer off, reset your scene, and save ArcGIS Pro. In step 5, we'll create and edit 3D data. We'll begin by adding our 2D building footprint feature class to our scene, and then in the scene, we'll extrude the buildings layer to 2.5D, and then we'll use the layer 3D to multipatch feature class geoprocessing tool to export our extruded 2.5D buildings to a new 3D buildings multipatch feature class. Then we'll go ahead and turn snapping off. We'll perform some simple edits on our 3D data, and then we'll delete the buildings that are around the stadium and replace them with a new multi-patch feature by adding a 3D model of a high school stadium. Back in ArcGIS Pro, I'm going to activate the catalog pane, and then in my demo data file geodatabase in the Sunset Valley feature dataset, I'm going to add the buildings underscore SV 2D building footprints, and you can see they are draped on top of my DTM in 2D. I'm going to go ahead and update the symbology so I can see my building footprints a little bit better. So that looks good. And so now I'm ready to create a 2.5D presentation of my buildings. So with the buildings feature layer selected on the feature layer ribbon under extrusion, I'm going to click on the type dropdown and switch from none to base height. And notice that the layer buildings doesn't have a vertical coordinate system. That's okay for our purposes. And then now under extrusion, I need to set the expression. So I'm going to click on the expression. and set it to a constant. In this case, it's going to be 30 meters, which is pretty tall, but allow us to visualize the extruded buildings. And there you can see extruded every building footprint in Sunset Valley from a 2D feature to a 2.5D feature or presentation. So it gives us perspective. I'm going to go ahead and reposition my scene over Burger Stadium in Sunset Valley. And then with my scene repositioned, we're now going to create a 3D building footprint. So I'm going to select the buildings layer in the contents pane, and then on the analysis ribbon, click on tools to open up the geoprocessing pane, and then search for layer 3D to feature class. Go ahead and open layer 3D to feature class. Click on the input feature layer dropdown and select buildings. The output feature class we're going to save in our project demo geodatabase simply as buildings underscore SV underscore 3D. Go ahead and click run. And so this exports our 2.5D buildings to a 3D buildings multi-patch feature class. And if I turn my buildings SV off, I can still see my 3D buildings that now represent not just perspective, but volume as well. And there you can see it listed as a multi-patch feature class in my demo geodatabase. Now I can edit these 3D objects. So with the buildings SV 3D layer selected, I'm going to set up my editing environment, make sure that it's selectable and editable. And for snappable, I want to turn off all of my snappable layers. It's going to make editing in 3D easier. And so over on the edit ribbon, again, I'm going to confirm that snapping is turned off. And then now I'll open up the modify tools. And in the modify features pane, I'm going to locate the edit vertices tool under the reshape group. Go ahead and open that up. And then now let's make some simple edits. So I'm going to select one of the stands and then hover over it and find maybe the back side and lift it up so it looks more like football stands. Go ahead and hit the check mark to accept those changes. And now I'm going to change the selection and show you a different kind of edit. This time I'm going to extrude the top face up. So those are just some simple edits. You can practice making edits as much as you want, but when we're done, we're going to select all of those building features around the stadium and delete them. And now we're going to replace them with a model of a stadium. So I'll click on the Create button to open up the Create Features pane. And then in the Buildings Feature Template, I can, for example, add a 3D cube or a sphere. But in this case, I'm going to select Model File. And then on Add One or More Models, I'm going to click on the little green plus and then locate and add the stadium.dae from our demo data folder. And that's going to add the model to the template. And then if I click on the model and then move my mouse out over my scene, you can see I can place the model anywhere in my scene that I want to. So once I get it where I want, I'm going to click on the mouse and place my model. Now I need to move, rotate, and scale my model. So again, in the Modify Features pane, I'm going to click on the Move button. And if I drag the little yellow dot, I can move my model around. I'm going to switch to the Rotate tool. And if I drag the green ring, I can rotate it and then scale. Scale is a little bit harder to get the hang of. You got to grab the yellow middle and then move the mouse in or out to scale it up or down. So I'm going to go ahead and scale it to size as best I can. That looks pretty good. I need to refine my placement a little bit. All right, that looks great. I'm going to clear my selection. And then when my model reappears, I'm going to save my edits. And there you can see we did a quick and dirty geodesign to simulate what a new planned stadium might look like in Sunset Valley. So I'm going to go ahead and reset my interface. reposition my view. That looks great. All right, go ahead and save your ArcGIS Pro project. This concludes the demonstration.